Bye.
Okay. Corey, we are here to interview about a book that we are reading in language, Paper Things, and connecting it towards your job. In Paper Things, there are two siblings, Ari and Gage, who had their mother die and had to live with their Aunt Jana. But after a while, they left the care of their Aunt Jana. Since they have left, Ari and Gage have been in a tough spot, like not having a home and constantly couch surfing. Also, Ari has been having trouble with school because there is no permanent home to work in to get if she wants to get into a school called Carter. And to get into school, you must have an address, which they don't have. Ari and Gage are put into tough decisions and events, but they are getting through as much as they can. Okay, so the first question I have is, in the book, Ari and Reggie are talking to each other when they get a brick thrown at them. Have you ever encountered a person who has talked about an event like this? Do you feel like this could affect a person in many ways? In what ways?
How old are these kids?
Reggie was a fairly old man. I believe he's a veteran. And Ari's in 5th grade.
Ari's 11.
Ari's 11.
And Gage is 19.
Yeah.
Gage is 19. Okay, so they were talking and a brick was thrown at them?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me think here. You know, I've had a lot of experiences with people where they've had a lot of bad things happen to them, I guess. Was the brick thrown, what was the brick thrown for? What was the...
It was thrown by a teenager and telling the Reggie to get a job.
Okay, so they were judging him for not being employed.
Yeah.
And not having a home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times when people are judged what I would consider to be unfairly, and sometimes people react to that in a really negative way, sometimes violent, and sometimes it's just teasing or bullying, that sort of thing. So yes, it's very, very common, I think, for people. More common than I wish it was. What were the other pieces to that question?
It was, do you feel like this could affect a person in many ways, and what ways?
Yes, it affects people in a lot of negative ways. One of the big parts to it, of course, is that they can be injured physically. That's a huge way, especially if it's a violent action. But also, you know, some of the other things that happen is it makes people feel unsafe to live in their communities or be around other people. A lot of times it makes people very distrustful of people. A lot of times it makes people judge themselves. So if somebody in the community is acting in a negative way about somebody not having a job, they may start judging themselves as in a similar fashion. That can lead to people feeling really down and depressed, which honestly makes it a lot harder for them to go out and search for a job. You know, it makes them less motivated when they're being bullied or, you know, being judged negatively in the community. If it's a serious enough thing, and if the person's kind of makeup is set up in the right way, sometimes they can have what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that is it's, you know, basically if somebody is exposed to a life-threatening event, or an event that threatens the life of somebody around them, or their person, or their integrity in some way, they can start re-experiencing that event over and over and over again. So they might have nightmares about it, they might just have thoughts about it coming up, and so they try to avoid those thoughts or those nightmares. And usually their attempts to avoid those thoughts, experiences, or nightmares, they either avoid people, isolate themselves a lot, they stay alone, or, you know, sometimes they get aggressive to push people away from them. These things can last decades and years and lifetimes for people if they don't, you know, find a way to get help and to kind of deal with them. Now that doesn't happen for everybody that has those experiences, but given the situation you're talking about with this, you know, group of people, you know, they probably don't have a lot of the resources necessary to to find the support and everything they need to get through it without experiencing negative consequence.
Okay. Our second question is, when you work with people in poverty, what do you normally say to them?
When I work with people in poverty,
Mm-hmm.
what do I say to them about what?
About like experiences they can go through, like helpful stuff.
A lot of times when I work with people experiencing poverty, the first thing I always do is I see them as just people, and I think that's the first thing that really needs to happen. People experiencing poverty are just people, like anybody else. They're like rich people. So I go in with a mindset, and that's the first thing. When I'm talking to them, you know, poverty comes up a lot of times. I'm a counselor, and you know, so I help people with problems they might be having and things like that. And poverty oftentimes plays a role in that. So when it comes up, then we definitely discuss it very straight on. And a lot of times it's a combination of working with them to be okay with themselves and not take on the judgments, the expectations of the community they live in. So if the community thinks that they're bad people because they live in poverty, I have to do a lot of work with people to realize they're not bad people because they don't have the same amount of money or resources as other people might. The other thing I do with a lot of people is work with them on finding the resources and support they need to not be in poverty. So it's kind of, you know, a combination of accepting people, teaching people to accept themselves, and helping them change as they can and want to. Sorry, are these too long of answers?
No, they're perfect.
That's great.
It actually helps explain.
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, if the wording I'm using doesn't work for you, just tell me and I'm more than happy to change it.
Okay. In our book Paper Things, Ari is shy and self-concerned. As a family therapist, do you have a hard time communicating with children and teenagers?
Not usually. When people come to talk to me, a lot of times they don't want to talk to a counselor anyway. And, most people come in pretty shy or guarded, and a lot of times that comes from feeling like I'm going to judge them or have expectations that they've had elsewhere. And so usually it's not shyness or anything like that that prevents me from working with somebody. It's whether or not I can actually connect with them and show them that I'm not going to judge them in a negative way. Once I do that, then usually we can start a conversation and really start working on things that we need to work on.
Okay. After Ari and Gage lost their mother, they have been in care of their Aunt Jonna. But Ari decides to sleep with Gage. Do you deal with families that are just siblings?
I've worked with a couple families that are just siblings. A lot of times it involves an older sibling taking care of a couple younger siblings. And those family setups, they come with their own special type of challenges, I think. A lot of times siblings, they're not expected to be in a role of a parent, I guess. And so when it comes down to parenting, a lot of times they need to be taught how to be a parent and to be a brother or a sister also. So we, a lot of times have to help the person they're taking care of actually recognize them as an authority or as a parent also. So it gets a little strange, but something that can be worked out too.
Okay. Do you take care of homeless people? If you do, why did you choose to be a licensed clinical professional counselor?
As a counselor, I've worked with people that have experienced homelessness on and off. A lot of times they're very transient. Sometimes they have a place, sometimes they don't. It's never been the one group of people that I work with, and there are professionals out there that work primarily with the homeless people. However, with me, it usually comes about because somebody in the community has called us up and said, hey, we have somebody that doesn't have a home, can you help them out? And at that point, we usually start to work with them. Sometimes there's an underlying mental illness, and that's not the case with the book you've been reading, it doesn't sound like. But for certain individuals, they have a higher tendency of having schizophrenia or things like that. Makes it really hard for them to live or to keep jobs or to manage themselves in a way that they would live in a home, yes.
This isn't a question, but may I ask what the schizophrenia is?
Oh, schizophrenia?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's a mental illness where somebody has, it's actually, there's a lot of, it's a brain disorder really. There's a lot of genetic pieces to it, so it's something people are born with. It usually doesn't show up until people are in their early 20s, but a lot of times they will experience hallucinations, which are hearing things, seeing things, feeling touch that's not real, or that nobody else can experience. It could be believing things that are untrue or unlikely to be true. So like a lot of conspiracies they might believe. Sometimes they might believe they're a prophet, or I'm trying to think of some other things, or that their family may be out to get them in some way or another, the community's out to get them. So it just makes life really, really difficult to live. And there's other symptoms that go along with it too, so it's not just those, but those are the main symptoms that people look for.
Okay.
Alright, so Ari engaged both of Jana's, and Jana took them as foster kids. Jana fed them, took care of them, but was really strict. Why do you think kids like Ari engaged want to leave a healthy home and go to the streets?
Sometimes it depends on, we're humans, and what humans like are stability and comfort. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to us a lot of times that if they're in a healthy home, why would they go? Because you would think that would be stability and comfort. If they're coming from an environment or a place where what they're used to is not stable and not healthy, then it's going to be difficult when they get somewhere that is stable and healthy. So that's not comfortable, that doesn't feel necessarily safe to them, even though from the outside it looks like a good place for them. The other part may be that, they have a lot of problems with somebody trying to step in maybe and be a parent to them. They may just have a lot of anger about that and resistance to that. Some people might feel guilty that, if they were to accept that person as a parent and their home life and all that, maybe they were doing disservice to their own parents who were lost. Nobody can replace your own parents, so they didn't necessarily want that either.
I think that nailed Gage right on the head. That's exactly what Gage is like in the story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he feels that Jana is controlling most of his life, I'm pretty sure, and wants to leave and wants to be on his own. So.
One of his excuses is that the rules are just too much for him, but I think it's like from all that he's done, and it just seems like that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I mean, you guys ever hear about those people who win the lotto? And then you would think their lives would be all set up and they'd have great lives and everything. That doesn't work that way because, again, people are more comfortable with what they know than what they don't know. So a lot of times people can have something really great happen for them, and they end up either in the same position they were in before or a worse one. And that's just how humans are. We like things to be the same all the time. So it's something that, I think as adults, as people grow older and stuff, it can actually be helpful and healthy for people to look at other ways of living or take different perspectives, because it can help them live, healthier lives overall.
Ari and Gage's mom died when they were young. As a family therapist, what strategies would you use to support them in this situation?
How young were they?
They
11,
Second
13.
grade. Ari was
Ari
second
was
grade.
young, so she was like second grade, and then Gage was probably like just going like
And
junior
we don't
high.
really know when they lost their dad. They lost their dad
In the Vietnam War, I think.
Vietnam or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So at least probably a couple years before mom.
Their dad, the loss of their dad wasn't as traumatic. Neither of them really knew their dad though.
Okay.
I think it was the Afghanistan War also.
I think it was.
Okay. So, so what would I do to help kids in that situation who lost their parents at a really young age? A lot of times it is, helping them through all the different stages of, grief that when somebody loses somebody. And that's a little different working with kids and adults on that. With adults, you can explain what the process is and what it looks like and what stages and what to expect and all that. But for younger children, it's a little more difficult because you have to really change it up so that they can understand. So a lot of times what I'll do is, I'm with them in a way that is safe for them, that they can talk to me about anything. And what I try to do with them is really help them develop a positive, healthy relationship with me, so then maybe they can do that with other adults in their life, the ones that are actually important to have those relationships with. And then help them, if they need to talk about the past, then we talk about the past. Not everybody needs to do that, though. That's kind of a thing that a lot of people don't get about counseling is, if somebody had something really bad happen in their past, we don't have to talk about it over and over and over again. Sometimes it's just learning how to live now versus, with what happened in the past.
Okay, Gage is trying to get an apartment for him and Ari, but he is having no such luck. What can someone like Gage do to help, to get help beyond couch surfing?
All right, so there's a lot. Like, a counselor is usually a good place to find resources, but sometimes the counselors may not be aware of all those resources, but there are places out there that can help people. So, for example, I know in our community there's a hotline called PATH Hotline. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
It's a crisis hotline, so if somebody's having a hard time, maybe they're feeling suicidal, very depressed, need somebody to talk to over the phone, they can call those people up and talk to them about it. It's totally free. But another piece of what PATH does is they do things for people that are homeless. So they have a big list of resources of all kinds of people that can help with homelessness. And sometimes, it could be helping people find jobs, even while they're homeless, which is possible. It could be helping people find apartments or find money to get an apartment. There's people that'll help with food and clothing. So for example, if somebody's going in for a job interview and they don't have any nice clothes to wear, that could affect the interview. So they can, help people with having appropriate clothes to wear to an interview. They can help people build resumes and get the school they need and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of different services, and usually in a community there's a kind of a clearinghouse or a place to go to get all those resources. And in this community, a lot of times it's packed. It's located in Bloomington. So.
We talked about in health last year about PATH.
Oh, good.
And they put the number on the board for the whole entire quarter to
Yes.
tell if you need to contact them. And I have their number on my phone just in case
Perfect.
something happens.
Yeah, they're great to have around. I used to do crisis work too, and in our community, what we did is if somebody had a crisis happening where they needed help, they'd give us a call, or they'd give PATH a call, and PATH would then call us, and we'd talk to the people and help them through whatever they needed help with. But we use PATH all the time. But I'd also use them just for resources. They're online too. They have a great database online. You can actually go to the website. I think it's path.org, and type in what you're looking for, like resources for people. And homelessness will be a big piece of that, and they'll list all the resources you need. So.
Okay. Ari is struggling in school. So when homelessness takes place, is it normal for a kid to struggle more?
Yes, definitely, for all kinds of reasons, okay? So a lot of times, if you look at just basic needs, you know, people going to school, whether they're adults or kids, they need to get appropriate food, you know, so they're not hungry all day. They need to have appropriate sleep, so, you know, when you miss your sleep, you're distracted, you're moody, irritable a lot of times, fall asleep in class. So if you're sleeping on a couch, even if you have a couch to sleep on, a lot of times that's not going to be great sleep, you know. Or if you're having to move all the time, you know, you get home from school and you don't have a home anymore and you got to find another one, you're not going to have time for homework, you're not going to have time for relationships at school that are positive with friends and stuff a lot of times. You may not have time for extracurricular activities, you know, or the money to pay for those. You know, so yeah, people will definitely be challenged more, let alone that, you know, another challenge is if people find out that somebody doesn't have a home or, you know, is living couch to couch, they may be stigmatized. They may have people that are judging them negatively for that, like getting bricks thrown at them and stuff. So, and that can definitely cause challenge at school.
We've seen that in Ari. Ari's school grades have, since when she was living in Jana, she was a star student. Everyone had high grades. Everyone loved her. When she started to become homeless, her grades dropped throughout the book. She was constantly trying to find time to do a social studies project that she's just now getting caught up onto. She's lost her best friend, or she did lose her best friend, and she had heard people talking about her behind her back, like talking bad about her greasy hair from not showering, not having a place to shower, and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the things that most of us take for granted that we don't even think about, like having a place to have a shower, those are the things that really can impact people. Another part of that I just totally blanked on too was that socially, you know, people may receive judgment from teachers too, or from not just their peers, but from the adults in their community. That maybe they, you know, they blame this family for not having a place to live, or for living in poverty, and they may blame and say they're bad people and they just need to get a job, or they just need to do this, or they need to do that. Which again, common sense wise says, yeah, that makes sense. You need money, so you gotta get a job. There's a lot more that needs to happen though before somebody can get a job a lot of times, including having a place to live. So, you know, it's like these judgments though can hold people back immensely, and it can lead to poor grades. Another thing with humans that happens is, and it's not 100%, it's not all the time, but a lot of times if somebody gets labeled as a bad kid, or they get labeled as a criminal in some way or another, or just a bad person, they will start to meet expectations that fit that role. So if somebody says to a kid, you're a bad person, you can't behave, you can't pay attention, you can't do this or that, a lot of times that kid will start to meet those expectations from that adult. So they won't behave, they don't pay attention, and they don't think they can be. So as a counselor, that's a lot of times what I do too, is to really try to fight those expectations that those people have had placed on them, and then help the person understand that those don't need to necessarily be a part of that person's outlook on themselves.
Well, that kind of ties into my next question. So,
Okay.
Ari does not really have the tools needed for school and cannot afford them. What could you do to help a kid like Ari?
In our community, we always had the tools like, you know, like pencils, pens, and all that. In our community, and I think in a lot of different communities, there's different organizations that can actually kick in money for that. We had an organization, and we still do, called Bright Stuff for Kids, and they actually collect school supplies through donations every year, and we give out 300 to 400, I think, schools, like full sets of school supplies for all the kids, whether they're living in poverty or not. You know, we want to treat everybody as equal. We don't check income levels or anything like that. But it gives everybody in the community a chance to be on the, you know, the same place, you know, so people can get free pens, pencils, notebooks. You know, we actually go through and get the lists of all the school supplies for people, and try to put bags together, which includes most, if not all of them. Even backpacks will get people, so everybody have very similar backpacks a lot of times. You know, it's kind of nice. Now in other communities, a lot of times, like those homelessness services that we were talking about a little bit before, they may actually have different resources that they can refer people to. But there's no one general one, it's all community based. So it depends on the community, the person you live in, but usually there's stuff out there. What time period does this take place for?
It's more modern. It's more like something that can happen nowadays.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Like within the past 5 years, I'd say.
5 years, okay, great, yeah.
Somewhere around that time frame.
Yeah, so yeah, that's, yeah, usually communities will have something, churches a lot of times will have ways to help people out like that too.
and the setting is set in Maine. It's like in a kind of big city, but not really that big.
Mhm.
So it's like kind of through the story, it explains what can happen during that.
Yeah.
So.
During your job, do you
Wait, Kylie, can you just do 3 and 4? We've
Am I
got
running you
15
guys
minutes
late?
left.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just we have,
A lot of questions.
well, a few of them have been kind of asked before too.
Okay.
Or not really asked, but like they were answered.
Okay.
Gage made many promises to Ari, like getting a home. Since that he hasn't gotten a home, do you think Gage should have made promises that he knew he couldn't keep?
That's a really good question. I imagine that Gage is attempting to, I think Gage is attempting to make his sibling feel safe. You know, and parents a lot of times, or people taking a parent role, will make a lot of promises to kids. And it does help people feel safe. Now, so I don't think it's necessarily the wrong thing to do. There's a lot of different ways to do it though too. So, you know, Gage's sibling may have an opportunity here to actually learn that, you know, because somebody makes a promise, they will make their best efforts to meet that promise. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. I think we've all made promises that something's happened that we just cannot achieve. So it can be actually a pretty good lesson to understand that parents aren't, or people trying to be parents who've never had any experience with it, they're not perfect and things don't always work out. Now, if somebody asks me this question before they make a promise, I'd probably tell them, you know, promise only what you can, for sure. You know, make a promise that you'll do everything in your power to make sure you have a place to live.
Have you ever helped any homeless people on the streets in your life? If so, how many people did you help? Was there one or many? Did you give them needs like food, shelter, or drinks, or even sometimes money?
Yes, usually where I worked in community mental health, what I would do is we would have people call our agency because they knew that we would do what we could to help people. And what we would do is we would, you know, sometimes they needed gas money. We'd ask them what they need really. Sometimes they need gas money. So we actually had a lot of gas cards that were either donated or that we would purchase with some of our funds. As our employees, we gave all the employees an opportunity to donate to what we called the client fund. So people who needed money, we would actually have a pool of money we could actually draw from every once in a while. We'd give out cash cards. We had a good relationship with the hotel. We had a hotel across the street from us. And so we would actually sometimes purchase rooms for people to stay in for a very short amount of time. I've given rides to people. There's, you know, in our community there weren't any homeless shelters, there weren't any, you know, and sometimes the resources just weren't there to help them out. So I'd actually give people rides to Bloomington, Decatur, Peoria. I've given rides all over the place for people who needed a shelter, needed some service that we couldn't offer in our community. We bought food. Our agency's always been active in the food pantries. Another big piece is doctors and medical care. A lot of homeless people need a lot of medical care, especially when they're really got something that needs taken care of right away. We'll help people get to doctors they need to get to. A lot of times we help them with drug and alcohol problems, you know, so there's all kinds of things, I guess, that we actually do. Personally, I mean, in high school, I lived in a small town, and, you know, every once in a while we'd go up to Chicago and go to some of the stuff downtown. And I remember the experience multiple occasions walking around, and somebody that was homeless would approach me and ask for, you know, $1 or $5 or something. And if I had it, I would just give it to them. And I remember my friends a lot of times would be like, "What are you doing that for?" They're just gonna go and use that on drugs or alcohol or, you know, whatever. And in my outlook, it was the act of giving. I think that was important, and the expectations of what people do with what I give them is not, it's not up to me to decide how they spend that money or what they do with it. You know, if I can help somebody out just a little bit, I will. So.
Where's the money coming from? Like, you say that we as, like as in your organization, but where, like, to give hotel rooms and money and gas cards, like, where's that coming from?
So, what we would do is, you guys ever heard of Apple and Pork? The big festival?
Yeah.
Okay. So our agency always did a fundraiser during that time, and that's what a lot of the organizations in our community do. We'll all have booze or food or whatever. What we did was we actually picked up litter for the whole grounds, all that flea market area and up by the grounds and stuff. And then we'd get paid several $1,000s to do that. We'd all volunteer our time. We didn't pay people extra or anything to do that. And so what we would do then with that money is we put it into this client fund. The other thing we would do is, again, the employees would get paychecks, and they could choose to have a little bit of money taken out of their paycheck every week or 2 weeks to donate into that fund too, and a lot of people did that. So that's where our money came from. It was all given by employees, basically.
But this question kind of ties with the other questions. In the book, Paper Things, Ari and Gage run away from their guardian, Jana. Have you ever worked with some kids that have run away from their home or their guardian's home?
And one of the biggest reasons I think Ari ran away with Gage was because of their mother's dying wish for them to stay together.
Oh, I see. And were they gonna get split up or something?
Well, I don't think they would have. I'm sure that Gage would have still visited and talked to her. And in the reading that I'm in right now, they're making a schedule to where Gage will come and see Ari every once in a while.
Right.
But I don't know how Ari sees that, and that's probably why she ran away with Gage.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely worked with kids that have run away, teenagers especially. And, you know, for most of, I'd say, most of the time there was always a good, a decent reason from the kid's perspective. And logically, from an adult perspective, it made sense too. So, you know, a lot of times they're experiencing things that, you know, there could be a lot of abuse, or, you know, they were fighting all the time with siblings, or, you know, whatever. Now, I don't think that makes it safe or the best choice for somebody. So a lot of times what I would do working with those people would be to talk to them about the choices they were making, and how safe that was, if that was a good long-term solution, because usually it's it could be a good short-term solution, and then we try to find other options a lot of times. If I could not resolve it and they still had nowhere to live, which happened every once in a while too, then we'd get Project Oz involved. I don't know if you've talked to anybody through Project Oz.
Yeah.
Last year.
We do that with Health.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they help people. They develop plans with the person who ran away and their families. Sometimes they allow the person who ran away to have somewhere to live briefly while they try to work out some of those problems with the family. So they were a really good resource too. But a lot of times I try to resolve whatever problems happening in that house to make that kid not want to be there.
Okay, Manny.
Alright. In the theme for the theme of the book, it was mostly trust. Has any of the homeless people you encountered trustworthy? Have they seemed trustworthy?
You know, I think most people, no matter what their circumstances are, can be trusted to a certain point. And so, yeah, I think, everybody I've worked with is trustworthy. Now, when people start to be seen as not being trustworthy, what I start realizing a lot of times is that they're surviving at that point. You do what you need to do to survive, and I recognize that too. So, for example, if somebody's like very, very hungry, they have a family that is, starving basically, and they need food, if they go and steal food, or they go and steal something from somebody else and sell it for money for food, I don't think that's a wise decision, but I also know they're doing what they need to do to survive, and so I don't see that as making them not trustworthy, even if they have a criminal record or whatnot. So, but overall I'm a pretty trusting person too. Not all counselors feel that way, not all people that help people feel that way either. But from my outlook, people are generally trustworthy, and I don't place expectations on what happens when I give. So.
We're able to still keep on going.
What's
Just
that?
we can finish, keep on going
Okay.
with this. You're going to ask your second question.
So again, in the book, Ari would go out to find pennies on the streets.
Yes.
Since they wouldn't be able to, they didn't have any way of getting money, so she would find pennies on the street. Did any of the homeless you encountered did something that kind of like what Ari did?
Ari had like a little piggy bank where she would put all these coins, and
Yeah.
she used that money she wanted to save that money for when they get an apartment to help out with smaller things like soap, toilet paper, shampoo,
Food.
some snacks,
Probably
towels,
like,
just some of the basic necessities.
Yeah, a lot of times, what I would notice with people is they would do what they could to survive, period. So that planning of saving for the future doesn't always exist. But I would see them, if they found money, they'd, take it from the street. I see people sell things, pawn things off. They do all kinds of things, legal and illegal, to get money that they need to survive. So, yeah. People do what they need to do to survive.
Yeah, we're going to skip his third one and Katie answers.
Right. So, you said that you encountered some small families of like just siblings in poverty. How are they different from families that have parents, even if it would be just a mother or a father?
They're different usually. Like one of the big differences is like the person in that role of parent is usually a lot younger than other parents with similar aged kids. That parent a lot of times has less experience, less knowledge of how to be an adult and be a parent. And it's really tough for that person in that role too, because a lot of times they're still growing up themselves. So they're missing out on things that most people get to experience in that part of their life. So there can be a lot of conflict, a lot of mistakes made, I guess. It's hard to be responsible as a parent if you have no experience or you're not old enough to be in that role, especially if you don't have support from other adults. For the kids themselves, a lot of times they may feel, well, this is just my siblings, my brother, my sister, they're not my parent. So they may feel like there's nobody there that's going to be able to protect them all the time, or going to make sure that they have, safety all the time. So there's a lot of uncertainty, I guess, that gets thrown into those families too. But on the other hand, a lot of times those families seem very close to one another, and they love each other very much, and do everything they can to maintain that family. So.
Alright, so the book is called Paper Things, mainly because Ari has these little paper dolls that she will cut out of magazines. And she started this, like, before her mother died, she would cut these things out with her mother while her mother lay in bed sick. And she still has this connection with these toys, and she'll still make more of these paper dolls. Have you ever, have any of the people that you worked with done anything like that, like had a strong connection to some toy or some other object?
Most people have those objects. They may not be a toy or something like that, but yeah, people keep what professionally we call those transitional objects. So as a therapist, a lot of times I'll give somebody something to remember the time that we spend together by when they're done with therapy, because it helps them to keep in mind what they learned from me as a therapist. Well, parents and kids do the same thing. Kids hold on to those things a lot of times, that whether they're activities or actual things that they did with their parents to keep that connection in some way. It's very common. So, that's why a lot of little kids have blankies and teddy bears, and why we save so many of the things we save. So.
Yeah, my sister got a stuffed animal from my grandma when she was really young, and she still has that. It's like her best stuffed animal, and she's like always freaked out when she was, and she's in 6th grade right now, and she still has that connection with my grandma.
That's right. Yep. Those objects seem to, there's the reminder of that person who gave it to them. It's probably, a lot of times, I'm sure if she's making these paper dolls, that she's thinking about those positive times with her mom also. So it's a way to re-experience those same feelings a lot of times for people. So she probably uses it as a way to feel positive, to feel that connection, to feel safe, to feel protected, all those things that she's missing out without mom there, and the homelessness and poverty that's occurring.
Alright, also in the book, Ari had her paper thing. She was at a shelter, and some of the girls at the shelter had taken her paper things and drawn on them, doodled some mustaches or glasses onto the little people. So they were kind of ripped away from her in a way, and it was kind of heart-wrenching for her. Have any of your clients had that thing ripped away from them before they could let go of it themselves?
Trying to think. Yes, they have actually. It's really a difficult scenario. However, this is one of the things I work with people a lot, is any of the things we have, and that includes the people in our lives a lot of times. Ultimately, we have to deal with loss. Nothing is ever permanent, So those paper things eventually would have decayed if left alone, So, it's a lot, that happens a lot. A lot of times what I've seen is a family pet that somebody associates with a mom, and they're taking care of a pet, and that pet passes away. That's a big deal, and that's something that we really have to work on. But whenever those things are lost in a way, it helps them to get through the loss of their parent, or the loss of the person they have associated with it too, though. So, for example, have you guys ever heard of the times when people have breakups with boyfriends or girlfriends, and somebody gives the advice, just get rid of all the stuff they gave you, go and bury it or burn it or whatever. That's not an uncommon thing for people to do, and it's a way for them to kind of move on in their life. So life does that naturally too, by having people doodle all over your important stuff. So it's a very hard thing to have, especially for a child to learn, but I think it's an important one for all of us as humans to learn too. So.
Yeah, we have one more question.
Sure.
It's from Tanner.
Okay, so Ari and Gage at one point had to stay in the storage unit at one point. And have you ever experienced kids that like live in weird places like that? If so, what do they do?
I haven't experienced a child in a place like that. I have had families living in cars, so they're not even like heated homes or anything. We've had families that live out at a campground before in tents. We've worked with people. I actually worked with an adult who did live in a storage unit for a while too. The storage unit people don't like that, but she was able to do it for just a little bit of time. And it helped her get to that next step then too. But again, it's one of those things where people do what they need to do to survive, and that was a survival thing. So, but yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's all I have for you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for coming in.
Oh no, thanks for having me. It was great.
It was actually really interesting because of all the points that you said and all the connections that actually could go to things. And what you said actually went to an interview that someone else did a couple weeks ago. So.
Oh, wonderful! I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's amazing how all this kind of connects and stuff. So.
Thank you.
And I think it's important that